publish a newsletter every couple of weeks. It's the Tomorrow with Nish newsletter. If you're interested in subscribing, if you already aren't, just head over to tomorrowwithnish.com and you'll find a link to the newsletter. Quick sign up. And in those newsletters, I really try to get across like one core idea. And what often happens, because of the way my mind works, I end up opening a lot of doors in the process of thinking through what the latest newsletter is going to be about. And as we go through the writing and the editing process, and I work closely with somebody on the newsletter, I also work pretty closely with Claude Code, um, and they all help me to sort of hone in on the one key idea. And the feedback I always get, both from Austin, who works with me on the newsletter, and she is amazing, and from Claude Code is, hey, you're opening up the door to lots of other ideas. They're connected, but it's going to be hard for somebody to digest all this. So I decided to start doing these live streams every couple of weeks. So, one week I'll publish a newsletter, and the next week I'll do the live stream. And the purpose of the live stream is it allows me to go back to the newsletter, especially for those that um, haven't read it, aren't subscribed, and just to sort of cover off like the key points from it, but then also to dig into some of the other things that occurred to me while I was digging into this idea and getting to the core of the idea. But as I mentioned, lots of other doors opened along the way. So this latest newsletter, edition number 6, that you could probably see here up on screen if you're watching this, is the link is not there. Uber maxed tokens, but not Advantage. And this whole post was sort of keyed off of something that you may have seen show up in your LinkedIn feed over the last few weeks. Uber spent $400 million on AI tokens in the first 5 months of the year. So basically, spent its entire AI token budget for the year in the first 5 months. And I think it was the chief operating officer who said the link is not there, which basically translates into spend $400 million and not really seeing the return in value on that investment into AI tokens. And as I went through thinking about that and the what happened behind it, and the more importantly, the why it happened, I touched on a few things I've written about in previous editions of my newsletter that you'll often hear me talking about in my thinking in public videos that I post on LinkedIn pretty frequently. And the first thing was like at Uber, they like there are at a lot of other companies, and not just big companies. I've seen this at Uber, Amazon, Accenture, a whole bunch of other places, mid-sized companies, even small companies. This idea of like AI leaderboards, and it's related to this idea of like token maxing. And what's being prioritized, what's being incentivized through these leaderboards has been, I think, up until now, because there's more stories like the Uber one, um, usage, volume, more because we can do more. So what was getting incentivized on those leaderboards was logins that was happening at Accenture, which to me was sort of akin to buy a gym membership and you get credited, or you get like a pat on the back for just simply swiping your gym card membership and going to the gym. But maybe you just go to the smoothie bar and you're not actually getting on the treadmill or hitting the weights or anything like that. And a lot of them were around like this idea of token maxing, just use more and more tokens. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, well, Uber spent $400 million. They're one of the most financially um, not capable, but like from a financial point of view, they have a lot of resources. So sure, they could spend $400 million, and it's not going to break them, even though it didn't seems like it didn't really create a lot of return. But it's all relative, right? I've seen there's companies like Uber that spend 400 million. I've seen companies that spend 40 million and don't see the return. They don't see the link, as Uber's COO said. Companies that spend 4 million, 400,000, 40,000. It's all relative. And I'm seeing the vast majority of companies make the same mistake at Uber. And it really starts with like the incentives. Humans are incentive machines. We all are. Um, I think it was Charlie Munger, really famous investor, actually just like one of the most brilliant thinkers of the last few generations. He said, "Show me your incentives, and I'll be able to tell you what the outcomes are." So Uber incentivized token maxing, just use tokens, and people inside of Uber said, "Cool, got the message, gonna accomplish the mission," and they did to the tune of $400 million. And it reminded me of this story that I've heard multiple times over the years. It's a story of like India during colonial rule by the British, and I think it was in Delhi where I guess somebody from the British rulers at the time was getting frustrated with all the cobras that were prevalent in Delhi or whatever the city was, Delhi or Calcutta. Um, and they put out this incentive for every dead cobra you bring us, we'll give you X rupees or British shillings, whatever the payment form was. And then, of course, like human beings, we're pretty enterprising. So, like, oh, if I'm going to get paid for dead crowbars, then I actually want to figure out how do we actually like create more cobras that we can then kill and make dead and get paid. So, what the British rulers were after was less cobras. What they ended up getting is like an explosion of cobras. Same thing at Uber. They were actually what they were after was how do we create value with AI? But what they were incentivizing was token maxing, like just produce a bunch of stuff. And I think it was primarily the engineering team just went hog wild, produced a whole bunch of code and things like that. And who knows, like what that code was in service of. None of the published articles really get into that. But what they ended up getting was $400 million worth of spend. And again, their own chief operating officer said, don't really see the link. The value's not there. There's not that like, mythical Loch Ness like ROI that everyone's been in search of when it comes to AI. And so one, it's the incentives were misaligned. I think the lesson we should all be taking away from that, and this really infuses a lot of the conversations I have with teams I'm working with, is it's not just simply about giving out the licenses. It's not simply just about giving people permission and saying, okay, we've got a policy in place so there's clarity on what you can and can't do with AI. It's about what is this in service of? And throughout this latest edition, I also talk about my idea of like the floor and the canvas. I'm just scrolling here to another one of the images in here. And when I talk about the floor, I'm talking about like the execution work we do in organizations, the things that are almost like electricity have to be done to keep the lights on. But it's not necessarily what's going to differentiate you as an individual from others doing the same job or as a team from other teams doing the same thing or as an organization from your competition. It's table stakes. And that's where most of our AI energy and use of tokens is going, application of tokens. And I'm not using the term investment. I'm going to get to that a little bit later because most of what we're not doing right now is not really investing in AI. We're using AI, and then we're surprised we're not getting any real value or ROI out of it, despite what a lot of people are saying on LinkedIn, where they're getting these outsized ROI numbers. Not buying all of it. In fact, yeah, not buying all of it. So the floor is about the execution work, the table stakes, like the lights have to be able to be flicked on, and nobody has to think about it. It's important. It's infrastructure, and that's where most of our use of AI is going today. But then we've got this canvas, this idea of a canvas that I have. And that is where I think we need to be focusing more of our energy around how we're using AI, the how we're like making use of the tokens we have access to, whether it's $400 million like Uber, or if it's simply our, $20 a month ChatGPT account, or somewhere in between those two bookends. And the canvas is where we go to create new possibilities and new value. And I think what Uber is doing or has done, and I think what most are doing, and I would say at least 90 to 95% plus of what I see in terms of how AI, energy, tokens, time, and attention is being used is towards the floor. So my guess is, and I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is what happened at Uber and what is happening in a lot of other places is the incentives are oriented around use the tools, use the tokens, spend the tokens. And the natural default is going to be, well, if the incentive is to token max, I'm going to apply to the things that are already known, like the things we're already doing. A lot of which is like the execution work. Um, so we're already generating, this type of code for these types of like features or capabilities and things like that. I'm going to go and do more of that. And I don't know what Uber ended up creating out of the $400 million worth of tokens they spent. But if there had actually been like a whole bunch of new breakthroughs, new innovations, new advantages, they probably would have been talking about it. Um, and I think it's not just about like the wrong incentive, it's about like where are you focusing, that spending, not just of the tokens, but time, energy, focus, attention. Is it on the floor, the execution engine, or is it on the canvas? And that'll sort of lead into the next edition of the newsletter where I talk more about like what I think of as the AI investing pipeline. And if you follow me, watch any of my videos, read my newsletter, I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. I don't have a crystal ball. We're all figuring this out at the same time. I often like to say and think we're all sailing into the fog like the sailors of yesteryear without, complete maps, without an understanding of the terrain, without sophisticated navigational instruments. We're all doing that right now with AI. But as I think about the AI investing pipeline that I'm going to be writing about in edition 7, I think the floors where we want to, you know, maybe there it makes sense to make bigger investments right from the get-go. Um, or maybe not, because like that floor work is the execution work. We know things work this way and generate these types of outcomes. Um, I do think before we deploy like AI against it, or start to think about a whole bunch of agentic workflows, which is where I think agent agentic workflows, especially autonomous agentic workflows, probably have the most relevance is on the floor. I think we need to take a step and like sort of work through a investing pipeline and go, okay, we've got an existing process. We think AI can help us like streamline that process, free up human time, and focus and energy and attention for the canvas, which I'll get to in a moment. But now that we have AI, which I think of as an alien species technology, and it wasn't available yesterday when this process was created, designed, adapted over time, should we be reimagining this process? So I think that's step one for things that are part of the execution engine. And then once you've done that step of like reimagining it, determining if the process should be updated and changed. Then I think we quickly move through like a sequence. You create a what I think of as a prototype of possibility. So whether it's something as simple as a prompt or more sophisticated like an agentic workflow, how can we very quickly build that prototype so we're not spending a lot of tokens, we're not taking a lot of time and energy, we're able to move at speed. We're infusing it with some creativity, curiosity, and imagination. But this is sort of known terrain, that execution engine, that floor. um, and then once we've got that prototype of possibility, moving on to what I would think of as a validation stage. And there's probably going to be different criteria for validation, and then continuing to move through the pipeline. And I think we need like an investor's mindset to do that. I'll dig into more of this in edition 7. And I think the same thing for the canvas. We need to think with an investor's mindset as individuals, as team leaders, and especially as executive leaders. Because I think of AI, as I've said many times before, it's a middleware for the human imagination. It's a blank canvas of possibility. In fact, it's this it makes possibilities infinite, especially because AI is this continuously evolving tool. New capabilities are constantly showing up. Just think of what like we could do with AI 3 years ago versus 2 years ago, a year ago, even 6 months ago, and what we're able to do with it today, and how much easier it's getting. So these Uber type of examples, they're going to keep coming up unless we start to think about the right incentives and start to take more of an investor's mindset. And I think we have to do that as individuals, as team leaders, and especially as executive leaders, because we are all going to be able to create more, to do more. Um, and if we're not careful, if we're not bringing in investors' mindset, if we don't have the right incentives, a lot of what we produce, a lot of us are going to end up saying what the COO of Uber said, which is, I don't see the link. I don't see the value. And they're, to their credit, they're now rethinking what's our approach to AI, to the way we might spend, or really how we invest our token budget. And my guess is, like I'll be digging into in edition 7, they're probably going to be thinking about an investing pipeline. It also connects to like an idea I've been noodling on for probably a couple of years, which is I think the way organizations operate and the way they're set up are going to start to look more like maybe more like startup incubators, where small teams will start to organize around opportunities and challenges. And they'll almost, you know, very quickly, almost like you do at a startup hackathon, create a prototype of a solution to the opportunity, to the challenge. And that would then unlock potentially gaining, other budget as they validate the solution, as they prove out what the potential value of it might be. And I think we're going to have to, more of us, and maybe all of us are going to have to think with more of an investor's mindset. And what are some of the other things that I wanted to touch on that sort of came up through this? Is Yeah, so I talked about the investing pipeline, the incentives, cobras, the floor and the canvas. Um, and I guess the new idea I introduced in edition 6 was this idea of um, what was it? I want to pull it up here. This idea of like, actually, there's a couple of things I want to come back to. This idea of proactive regeneration. And again, this goes back to like the investing mindset. I think we're all going to have to um, infuse ourselves with. And proactive regeneration to me is sort of tied to this idea of the floor and the canvas. How are we investing our use of AI? And it's not just about tokens, it's our time, it's our energy, it's our focus, our attention, our imagination, our creativity, our curiosity. How much of it are we investing into the floor so that we can, hand off and delegate more of the sort of known terrain to the machines, with humans in command of designing um, how those parts of the execution engine, the floor, will be, operated by the AIs. And I use that term very broadly and generically. And how much of that token, time, attention, energy, imagination, creativity, curiosity will be targeted towards the canvas. And I think at the intersection of that is what I think of as proactive regeneration. It's targeting at the execution work, the machine like work that all of us um, are saddled with. Some of us are drowning in, because that used to be the hard work. So we had to do it. But now we have these machines available. And if we actually intelligently invest some of our capabilities and the available tokens in doing that, then it frees up our ability to, one, more effectively and efficiently harvest today's advantage. The way we create value today, the way we create differentiation from the others today, and to really harvest that yield effectively, efficiently, before somebody uses AI to take part of our yield, take part of our harvest. And then it also frees us up individually and collectively as teams and organizations to then be able to think about pointing our tokens and our capabilities, more of our imagination, creativity, curiosity towards the canvas to find new possibilities, new advantages, new value. And I think of that balancing act as proactive regeneration because as I've talked about before and written about in the newsletter, I think we're moving from a world where most of us are in the execution economy because the execution, the doing work used to be the hard thing. And now it's becoming easier and easier and easier because these AI tools are the ultimate execution um, machines. Yeah, they're execution machines. So that's no longer going to be our primary job. And it's no longer going to be how organizations are able to sustain advantage for an extended period of time. That used to be possible yesterday. I don't think, I think it's a new reality that's quickly emerging. And most of us are going to have to be oriented around regeneration is going to have to lead. We're going to have to create new possibilities, new value, new advantages on a more frequent basis, at a more rapid rate. As individuals, we're going to need to update our skills more often. As teams, we're going to have to think about like how do we constantly um, automate and commoditize yesterday's advantage before somebody does it to us and we push it to the floor so it's like part of our infrastructure so that we're opening up ability to inhabit what I think of as a canvas to create new possibilities, new advantages, new value of tomorrow. So there's proactive regeneration. And one thing I'll be talking more about is this idea of license to Claude or Claude. Claude, I think, outside of Canada, I'm Canadian, so Claude is a common French Canadian name, so I go between the two. So license to Claude. This came up in a discussion I was having with an executive team of a pretty fast growing company, ironically, in the AI space, more on the hardware side. And the head of the software development team said that one of the things that he's implemented is that people that are relatively early in their career, so new grads and things like that, they don't get a license to Claude immediately. It's more for the seniors. And over time, as they're seeing, people, the juniors, the newbies, develop certain, you know, skills, capabilities, perhaps early sparks of engineering wisdom. Then they get a license to Claude. I thought that was interesting. I've got a different take on it. Not saying that one's wrong. I don't think it's necessarily a junior senior thing. I think it's a mindset thing. And something, just sort of zooming out here, I think we need to be orienting more around what is the mindset we need to be training for versus the mechanics. The mechanics are actually the easy part. I'm going to be doing another post about that in the next couple of days. Because just as a preview, 2.5 years ago, everyone thought they'd have to become a prompt engineer. Today, how many people actually write their own prompts? You don't. I don't see roles for prompt engineers. It's because every new, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is possible with AI, where initially it sort of feels like you've got to become technical again. It's very quickly becoming just part of, like, not infrastructure, but it's almost like oxygen. It's just becoming easier and easier to do. Like, I'll have a 45-minute back and forth with Claude about something that some outcome I'm trying to achieve. And at some point, if relevant, I'll be like, oh, this should probably be a reusable prompt, or we need to probably turn this into a series of agents. I'm not going to write the prompt or anything like that. Claude will. It's native language, not mine. Anyways, um, mindset over mechanics. I think we need to be thinking about that. And I wonder if we would benefit in organizations as we're thinking about adoption and most especially adaptation, prioritizing what are the mindsets we need to fully take advantage of these tools so we don't get into an Uber like situation and spending $400 million and creating a whole bunch of code that didn't really create value. Or even if it did create a whole bunch of, like, oh my God, like a bunch of breakthroughs, let's say it did. All $400 million of that token spend created like unbelievable breakthroughs. Going back to that idea of the investor mindset, not the mechanics, the mindset, somebody should have been asking, are we able to digest that much new possibilities? Or if we had an investing pipeline somewhere along the way, do we apply judgment? Sometimes people use taste or curation, but do we apply judgment to say, hey, we want to max out on spinning up a whole bunch of like prototypes of possibility, and some will then move to the validation stage, and some we will like finally like make big investments into to make sure they are we're able to fully scale them, that we're able to iterate on them, that they're able to stand up to whatever usage they need to be put through. But I wonder what happened at Uber if everyone's doing this because they had that leaderboard, and let's say they had $400 million worth of like whole bunch of new possibilities. They all got validated, and then they all end up here. You can't digest that as a company. You can't get your customers to digest that much new innovative stuff. It's just not possible. We're not built for that. So again, mindset over mechanics. And coming back to this idea of license to Claude, what are the mindsets that we need to have as individuals, team leaders, executives in organizations, in terms of our use and deployment, and investment related to these these tools, because they can be magical, or as I say, they can be superpower, or they can be kryptonite. For Uber in this moment, it was kryptonite. And again, even if they created a whole bunch of new amazing capabilities with that $400 million spend, the kryptonite may have shown up at the end, almost like, going to the Chinese buffet and eating 20,000 calories in an hour because you can. Like, you're not going to feel very good. And it's the same thing here. Um, and yeah, I think I'm gonna end it there. So first time I'm doing this. If you found this valuable, let me know. If you didn't find it valuable, let me know. Or if you'd like to see me joined by others, maybe somebody reading the newsletter and talking about some of the issues in it, maybe we would focus on the questions that I include at the end of every newsletter. I'd love to do that. Yeah, if you think that would be valuable. So let me know. Appreciate your time, and I will hopefully see you on the next one. That will be in 2 weeks. Going to try and do them every second Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, July 1st. It's Canada Day, but I'm of course working because I want to. I'll go out later for the fireworks. So going to try and do them every second Wednesday at 11 Eastern time. Um, if I'm not on a plane or with clients. Tends to happen pretty often, so the times and dates might shift around a little bit. But please do let me know if you found this valuable or if you didn't, because I would love your feedback and give you an opportunity, excuse me, to help shape